For many years, people loved the TV show I Love Lucy. It was a funny show where Vivian Vance made everyone laugh. Millions of people loved watching Ethel Mertz, the clumsy but helpful neighbor who got into trouble with Lucy. But after staying quiet for years, Vivian Vance finally told everyone the sad truths that were hidden behind all the fun. She talked about how mean people were to her, how they made her gain weight so she wouldn't look too pretty, how upset she got during filming, and how she had to work with a man she called the worst person on earth. Here are the secrets about Vivian Vance and I Love Lucy that nobody knew about. And make sure you read until the end because the last secret will really shock you. The truth about the mean contract behind playing Ethel Mertz. In 1951, American TV was surprised by a casting choice. Vivian Vance, who was 42 years old, got the role of Ethel Mertz in the famous TV show I Love Lucy. But right from the start, people whispered rumors about this job. For many years, people believed that Vivian Vance had to sign a mean contract that said she had to gain 15 pounds just to make Lucille Ball look prettier. What's really true? There was no such contract. It was just a joke that Lucille made up at a party with silly rules like gain 5 pounds every week or never be funnier than Lucy. But surprisingly, Hollywood believed this joke was real. The truth is, Vivian's weight went up and down over time. She had tried diets and worried about how she looked, but nobody ever forced her to do it. Still, the rumor was enough to hurt Vivian. People thought she was just a shadow who had to sacrifice herself to let Lucy shine. Lucy once said something cold to Vivian. "You can't be Ethel. You're my age. You have the same hair color. You're too pretty." To deal with this problem, the crew made Vivian wear ugly clothes and use makeup to make her look older. On screen, Ethel Mertz was a simple character who stood next to Lucy to make the main actress look brilliant. But behind the scenes, it was done on purpose to hurt her. The mean contract rumor made people treat Vivian Vance badly. But that was just the beginning. The big fight between Vivian Vance and William Frawley. The first time Vivian Vance met William Frawley, who would play her TV husband, the mood was tense. When she saw him, she turned to Desi Arnaz and asked, "Who's that old man?" When she heard he would play her husband, Vivian laughed. "He looks more like my grandfather." Unfortunately, Frawley heard everything, and from that moment on, they started hating each other. To him, Vivian was not just someone he worked with, but a rude and ugly woman. That hate stayed with them during all their time on I Love Lucy. Frawley made fun of Vivian, calling her a doorknob, and she felt embarrassed having to play the wife of a man 25 years older than her. Desi Arnaz later admitted that Frawley hated her voice, and she hated being around him. Meanwhile, William Frawley had problems with drinking too much alcohol. By 1953, he was drunk almost all the time. On set, he would hide his shaking hands in his pockets. His eyes were red, and his speech was unclear. He would argue with the director in the middle of filming and lock his dressing room door, making everyone wait. Vivian Vance couldn't take it anymore. She asked for her own separate dressing room. From then on, Fred and Ethel only acted like they liked each other when the cameras were rolling, and they ignored each other in real life. The hate didn't stop when they finished filming. Instead, it got much worse, leading to one of Hollywood's most famous fights. At her worst, Vivian Vance would rather die than appear with William Frawley, even celebrating after his death. In 1955, Desilu Studios had a big idea. A new TV show starring the two beloved characters, Fred and Ethel. William Frawley said yes right away, but Vivian Vance said no in a cold way, stating, "Without Lucy and Ricky, this show would fail." Hollywood was shocked because they thought Frawley and Vance worked great together on screen. However, for Vivian, even a lot of money wasn't enough to make her go back to the hell of dealing with Frawley every day. In the end, this fight didn't end even when someone died. On March 3, 1966, William Frawley suddenly died of a heart attack on Hollywood Boulevard. When she heard the news while at a dinner party, Vivian was happy. She raised her glass and said, "Champagne for everyone." There were no flowers, no sorry messages, and not a single tear for her former co-worker. The anger that had lasted since 1951 ended when her enemy was finally buried. However, William Frawley was not the only ghost that haunted Vivian's life. After leaving the studio, she had to face another kind of hell. Vivian was hurt by her husband while filming I Love Lucy. In 1954, during filming, Vivian Vance often came to work with a black eye from being beaten by Philip Ober. The injury was easy to see under the bright lights, which made the main actress Lucille Ball very angry. Lucille pointed right at Vivian and said, "If you don't divorce him, I will do it for you." This abuse happened because their careers were so different. While Vivian was famous, Philip Ober's career was getting worse. Philip Ober was always jealous of his wife and beat her many times. But she put up with it because back then, Hollywood would not easily accept a female star publicly dealing with being hurt at home. Not only that, after every scene that made people laugh, Vivian often had to be strong to hide another truth. She was falling apart inside. Vivian Vance had to get therapy during filming. The years of filming I Love Lucy from 1951 to 1957 were a constant struggle for Vivian Vance with mental health problems. These problems started from her difficult childhood. Vivian Roberta Jones grew up in a small town controlled by strict Methodist church rules. Her mother, a very religious person, always saw the stage as a direct path to hell, and acting as something shameful. From when she was young, whenever she showed she loved the arts, Vivian was cruelly stopped, making her feel like an outsider in her own family. This worry followed her into adulthood. In the 1930s, Vivian had part of her face become paralyzed. Although she got better, a deep fear about how she looked stayed with her. The pressure of acting made her heart feel tight every time a camera pointed at her, causing sleepless nights and forcing her to get professional help. Even sadder, Vivian had to keep her weight higher than she wanted, wear frumpy clothes, and use makeup to make herself look uglier to make Lucille Ball look better. She often had to admit, "I had to go to therapy just to be able to handle filming." For someone who was already emotionally weak, the pressure from the set was like adding fuel to a fire. And when that tension couldn't be held in anymore, it burst into big fights. Lucille Ball and Vivian had a big fight before becoming best friends. During the filming of the second season of I Love Lucy in 1952, Lucille Ball was pregnant with her second child, Desi Arnaz Jr. The filming schedule was very tight, and the whole crew had to adjust to Lucy's health. One day, Vivian was late because of a traffic jam on the way to the studio. Lucy immediately got very angry. She yelled angrily in front of the whole crew, "Do you know how long we've all been waiting for you?" But instead of staying quiet, Vivian immediately yelled back. Strangely, Lucy laughed at her boldness. That moment changed their relationship. From a strained dynamic, Lucy and Vivian began to find a special connection, and they became best friends for the rest of their lives. This close friendship helped them work together perfectly on screen, creating some of the most famous comedy scenes ever. But few people know that behind the endless laughter of the audience, there were scary secrets behind the scenes. The horrible secrets behind the chocolate factory scene and the Vitamea Tavegamin ad. The classic chocolate factory scene in 1952, where Lucy and Ethel quickly stuffed candies on the moving belt, was actually a painful experience for Vivian Vance. The machine kept breaking and the moving belt's speed would suddenly get faster, forcing her to swallow one chocolate after another. By the end of the day, Vivian was exhausted and felt sick. The audience laughed, but Vivian had to deal with the pain. That sacrifice didn't stop there. In a 1952 commercial for Vitamita Vegamin, Vivian had to drink a tonic that had 23% alcohol in it. To get a realistic shot, she had to drink until she was clearly drunk on TV. The audience saw it as a great performance, but they didn't know that in the early days of television, there were no laws to protect actors. The price of comedy sometimes had to be paid with one's own health. And then nobody expected that the very role of Ethel Mertz, which seemed to be just a shadow next to Lucille Ball, would secretly change Hollywood history in a way no one could have guessed. The role of Ethel changed Hollywood history. In 1953, Vivian became the first woman to win an Emmy for Best Supporting Actress, a brand new category created to honor her. This award not only recognized her talent, but also changed how Hollywood looked at female characters who weren't the main stars. Before that, most of the attention was on the lead roles, while supporting roles were often ignored. But with Vivian, the character of Ethel Mertz proved that a supporting role could still win the hearts of the audience and shape popular culture. That Emmy victory seemed like a brilliant high point. But for Vivian, the spotlight brought not only glory, it also opened up a series of dangers and limits where she had to pay a heavy price for the very fame she had just achieved. Vivian faced danger and limits after becoming famous. The role of Ethel Mertz turned Vivian Vance into a legend. However, the image of this boring woman accidentally trapped her in just one type of role. Behind the awards, Vivian always wanted to be recognized as an independent star, not just Lucille Ball's shadow. When her fame exploded, the dark side of being a celebrity also appeared. In 1956, thousands of letters came in each week. Along with sweet praise were scary words, threats, sick suggestions, and even twisted pictures of her face with the words, "Ethel must die." Someone would follow her everywhere, hide behind fences to take secret photos, and even knock on her door in the middle of the night just to see Ethel in real life. And to get around town, she had to hire a bodyguard for her safety. These obsessions increasingly wore Vivian down until she realized she couldn't live forever in the golden cage, named Ethel Mertz. And then she made a shocking decision. The decision to quit the role shocked the public. In 1965, Vivian Vance did the unthinkable. She left the role that had made her career. This meant giving up her comfort zone, fame, big paychecks, and the chance to live forever in the image that millions of fans expected. Many called it career suicide. Studios gossiped that she had gone crazy, and newspapers had headlines that Vivian had betrayed her audience. But for Vivian, this was the price she had to pay to be herself. She would rather face the risk of not having a job and having the entire country turn against her than live forever in Lucy's shadow. That decision opened a new chapter, but not the one Vivian had dreamed of. However, a harsh reality quickly set in. After I Love Lucy, Vivian was fired from a Broadway play and had to do commercials to make a living. In 1966, Vivian returned to the stage in Woody Allen's play, Don't Drink the Water. But during the rehearsals, she was fired and replaced in front of critics. Woody Allen clearly said she wasn't right for the role. The play went on to have a successful 598 show run without Vivian. By the 1970s, Vivian gave up the stage lights to look for stability. She became the familiar face of Maxwell House coffee commercials, playing Maxine, the kind neighbor with a warm smile and a cup of coffee. Vivian Vance's Maxwell House commercials may have been loved by the public, but for her, they were a bitter reminder. The height of Broadway and her 1953 Emmy were long gone. The woman who once made all of America laugh was now just trying to hold on to any chance for the audience to still see her on screen. But behind the bright smile in those ads, Vivian's life took a darker turn. She hid her tiredness and sudden bouts of exhaustion. Behind Vivian's smile was a serious health problem. In 1977, Lucille Ball invited Vivian Vance to be part of the CBS special Lucy Calls the President. For the audience, it was a sweet reunion between Lucy and Ethel. But behind the scenes, the reality was very grim. During the shoot, Vivian had a small stroke. She shook but hid it, keeping her smile and staying completely in character. No one on set knew that it would be her final performance. Additionally, Vivian was also fighting breast cancer, a disease that had spread and worn her down since 1973. Despite having surgery and chemotherapy and being hurt by bone pain, she kept her smile and wit every time she appeared in public. Only when the door closed and the lights went out did people know that behind that smile was a fierce and silent battle. A battle that the world only dared to name after she had died. The hidden sadnesses and end of a legend. Vivian Vance once said, "People saw me make them laugh, but no one knew how many times I cried when the curtain closed." And indeed, her life was a long series of physical and mental wounds. The built-up trauma caused Vivian to have several mental breakdowns. The first was in 1945 while on a theater tour. Later, a doctor said she had chronic anxiety disorder, something that came from her childhood being held back by her mother and her bad marriages. There are records that in 1974 she had a severe breakdown and had to think about shock therapy. In a time when mental health was still taboo, Vivian had to both hide and quietly become a symbol for women in the same situation. But her deepest sadness was not being able to become a mother. A miscarriage with Ober closed that door. From then on, all her efforts failed. Vivian loved Lucy and Desi Jr. as if they were her own children. But watching Lucille Ball raise her own children only made the emptiness deeper. She hid that pain by being a professional mother, helping young actresses, and giving them the care she never had the chance to give her own child. The chance to escape the shadow of Ethel once came. When I Love Lucy ended, CBS offered a spin-off series about Fred and Ethel. William Frawley immediately said yes, seeing it as a golden ticket to keep his career going. But Vivian firmly said no. She coldly stated, "No amount of money is big enough to make me go back to him." 6 years of dealing with an alcoholic, mean colleague was more than enough for Vivian. Freedom was more valuable than fame. By the late 1970s, Vivian's body was weak from illness. In 1979, she lived her final days in Belvedere. Lucille Ball, her companion, rival, and close friend, came to visit. A witness said they sat together all afternoon laughing and crying. When Lucy got up to leave, she quietly cried without saying a word. Her daughter Lucy Arnaz later said, "My mother cried for Vivian for months because despite the arguments and jealousy, the bond between them was deeper than any spotlight." On August 17, 1979, Vivian Vance took her last breath. Before that, she left handwritten letters telling about the bitterness she had carried throughout her life. Being denied directing opportunities just because she was a woman, being trapped in a single role, and being looked down upon and underestimated by producers. These letters were not just a goodbye. They were a final accusation, a cry from a heart that had been exhausted after a lifetime of endurance. Vivian Vance, the woman who made millions of viewers laugh with Ethel Mertz, died with sadnesses no one knew. But she left behind a lasting legacy, a reminder that behind every laugh, there are sometimes scars that never heal, and real people who sacrifice themselves to fuel the illusion on the small screen. Vivian Vance didn't just leave laughter. She left a quiet revolution in American television. Before Ethel Mertz appeared on screen in 1951, the idea of outstanding supporting actress was almost non-existent. Vance changed that. In 1953, she became the first woman to win an Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actress, creating a new category and proving that the side character could also be the soul of a work. That legacy is not just in the awards. It's in her courage to fight for her rights, asking for a raise, better clothes, and recognition. In a time when most actresses stayed silent, Vivian dared to say, "I know my worth." And she turned that voice into an example for generations of female artists to come. But Vivian Vance's greatest legacy is not contracts or numbers. It's the model of an ordinary yet extraordinary woman on the small screen. While Hollywood chased glamorous, fancy images, Vivian brought an everyday character who was clumsy yet smart, funny yet genuine. Ethel Mertz became a familiar face in millions of American homes, the neighbor you'd want to have, the best friend you could trust. Today, looking back, audiences don't just remember a comedy character. They remember a woman who had to sacrifice herself to keep others laughing. They remember an actress who paid the price with her health, her youth, and her true self to dedicate herself to art. Vivian Vance died in 1979. But every time I Love Lucy is shown again, she lives again. And that legacy will never disappear. A reminder that behind every laugh is strength, toughness, and sometimes wounds that never heal. Many people still prefer to think that every story ends in brilliant light, with eternal glory and loud applause. But the most important part of any legend is often hidden in the darkness, a place the audience was never allowed to enter. For the public, it's a shiny picture, flashing cameras, flowery words, endless smiles. But just by pulling back the velvet curtain, we'll see a cracked foundation stained with scars that time and silence deliberately tried to cover up. Legends are not born from peace. They are made in loneliness, in long sleepless nights, in moments when lifeless eyes stare into the dark backstage. Behind the bright smiles on magazine covers is a fragile mask. Behind the passionate cheers is a tired heart that has paid the price for public love. Some truths seem to be buried forever under the dust of time. But all it takes is an old piece of paper, a word that slips out in a careless moment, and the entire castle of glory can fall down. And when the mask falls, the cold question echoes. Were we celebrating a real person, or just an illusion skillfully staged to hide the abyss behind it?